Hi there, it's Brenda. Sarah is sick today, and I'm recording just a quick solo episode until she and I can get back to recording on our regular schedule. I do want to talk about something that comes up a lot for survivors of narcissistic abuse, and that is what therapy should actually look like, what the first few sessions feel like, and how to know you're in the right room with the right therapist. And a quick disclaimer, this is educational. This is not therapy right now. I am a licensed therapist and I've been working with survivors of narcissistic abuse for many years. And now that's all my caseload consists of. I've written a couple of books. I do classes and support group and this podcast with Sarah typically. But I do want to say that right now, if you're in any danger or being threatened or being stalked, please prioritize safety and reach out to local resources. And what I'm going to talk about here is mostly about when you're in a position, whether you're with your narcissist, not your narcissist, with the narcissist in your life still, or you're already out. What can you do to start healing and getting back to whomever you were before the relationship or figuring out who you are? So that's the point of this episode. So what I see a lot with folks who are typically just starting therapy, and this is actually very, very common. They kind of start to notice that something is wrong. They do a little research on the internet and start to see that a lot of the results they're getting are talking about narcissistic traits. And then they start kind of going down a checklist. Yes, my partner does this or this or this, or my parent or my coworker, whatever it is. They start to see some similarities, and then they start looking for therapists that specializes in narcissistic abuse. And that's typically the path of how people find me in my practice and work with the therapist at my practice. And oftentimes too, they're looking for answers. And most people come in asking, is this really narcissistic behavior? Is there a personality disorder? And oftentimes people are questioning whether they themselves are narcissistic as well. People also really want to know, why do the narcissistic personality types do what they do? And of course, we're curious about it and trying to make sense of it. Folks want to know how they get closure. How do I talk to them to make them actually listen to me and understand how I'm feeling? And that's there is no way. The answer to that is there's no way. They're not going to understand. And understanding takes vulnerability and empathy, and they don't have that. Sorry for being so terse, but that's just true. But I get all of this. All of the gaslighting that is alive and well in every narcissistic relationship trains your brain to chase certainty because there's so much confusion. So we spend time ruminating and going through things over and over and over again, trying to make sense of them. And we never will. We never will. You never will, because you don't think the same way that a narcissist thinks. You probably have a lot of empathy, maybe even more than most people. That's pretty common with the folks that I work with. So you're never going to be able to make sense of how they think or why they do the things that they do. So I know that may sound frustrating or hopeless, but I hope it also can sound freeing to you. You don't have to waste any more time trying to figure them out. Some people are just wired poorly, and a narcissist absolutely is. And their lack of empathy is something that they're never going to come back from. They can fake it. They can go to therapy and learn how to look empathetic, but they can't actually feel it. And that's the most important part. The other piece is too that therapy doesn't typically give you like closure, whatever closure actually is, from the narcissistic relationship. And I don't really think that's the goal. I mean, I think really what we need to do is realize that they're a predator and we are the prey. And I know that doesn't feel good either, but that is the truth of it. And when we can accept the truth, I think that is the healthiest thing that we can do for ourselves. And predator and prey may not be the language you want to use, but realizing that they're trying to get the best out of you and the best of you. They are trying to take everything they can from you until there's nothing left and they have complete control. And then they will turn to other sources of supply if they haven't already, and they probably already have. They usually keep a lot of people around them, flying monkeys and whatever other source of supply they can get and keep. It helps you to stop negotiating with confusion, that rumination, trying to make sense of it. It helps you trust what you saw, what you felt, and what you lived. Therapy helps you stop negotiating with confusion. Like I said, with the rumination and trying to make sense of all of that, we don't need to do that anymore. It helps you trust what you saw, what you felt, and what you lived. and believe it for what it was. What good therapy focuses on instead is, how do I stop abandoning myself? When we've been in these relationships, even for a short amount of time, we have learned to put ourselves so far on the back burner, we're not even in the kitchen anymore. We are not listening to our basic needs, even diet and hydration and all of those things. We are just not paying attention to that anymore because we're basically living in survival mode. So because narcissistic abuse conditions us for self-abandonment, we learn to over-explain, over-accommodate, and we second-guess our gut until we don't even recognize what our intuition is telling us anymore, or we don't believe it, and we certainly don't recognize ourselves anymore. So therapy is really about rebuilding. It's rebuilding self-trust, boundaries, emotional regulation. Grief work is a big one. Identity repair or rediscovery. And probably most important, nervous system stabilization. When we're in survival mode all the time, everything feels like an emergency and we are tense and we are not able to rest fully. It comes with so many problems. And most of the clients I've worked with over the years have some form of autoimmune issue, mostly with digestive issues. That's a really, really common one. But just so many different ones. I've had people with lupus. I've had lots of people with fibromyalgia, and just a plethora of things. It takes a toll. And the longer you're with the narcissist, I think the more dysregulation is going on, not only in your mind, but in your body as well. This is your life we're talking about, right? We have so little time ultimately. And why would we want to spend it like this? So, with the first few sessions, you shouldn't feel like you're on trial trying to defend why you stayed in the relationship or why you didn't do anything or why you allowed this or that. None of that should be happening. Never, ever. And make sure if you're working with a therapist that says that they understand narcissistic abuse, that make sure they really do. Because I think a lot of therapists understand narcissism, the narcissistic personality disorder, but I don't think a lot of therapists really understand what happens to us when we've been in these relationships and the slow chipping away of who we are. So please find somebody that really gets it and probably somebody who's lived it. We have therapists at my practice, and many of them are very, very well versed and have had their own experience and do this work to help clients heal too. We don't want you to have to relive every detail, but sometimes telling your story is part of the healing. So that is entirely up to you. It does help give us context to know what's happened to you, but I don't think any therapist is going to want you to sit in pain for too long, right? We want to work on understanding what you've been through and then work on how can you rebuild your life, rebuild yourself, and not be in panic or survival mode 24/7. And then early in therapy too is about safety and stability. So I always worry about this when people come and work with me in the beginning, because I am going to get to know you. And I don't think we can do meaningful work, unless you trust me, right? And you're not going to trust me when you only just met me one or two times. So I think the building rapport is such an essential part of any kind of therapy, but probably especially this kind of therapy when you've lived in such a distrustful state for so long. A lot of us can feel pretty paranoid about other people. You've been really emotionally brutalized by somebody for so long. It's hard to see other people as having some good in them and being trustworthy. And I think that just needs to be built. So safety and stability first. And then we would probably cover a broad overview of the relationship dynamic and what symptoms you're dealing with now, like sleep, panic, rumination, shutdown, hypervigilance, brain fog, and your current contact level with the narcissist in your life. Are you living together, co-parenting, court, no contact, low contact? Are they hoovering you? And then a common starting goal for folks that come to therapy often is that they want closure, as I mentioned before. And another is that they want to stop missing them. And that is heartbreaking because it's hard to make sense in your brain of how you could miss somebody who treated you so poorly. But in these situations, trust me, it makes sense and you are not alone. You are not alone. We all experience this. If it was your parent that was narcissistic, there's a whole other level of wounding there that is incredibly difficult to wrap your head around, much less heal from. Not impossible. The healing can be done, but these are deep emotional wounds that we're dealing with. So this therapy may take a while. And that's another thing I worry too when folks come. Like, I consider myself to be an expert in this topic. I definitely have done the work and have the education and the lived experience. So I do know what I'm doing. And I think people often will come to me and aren't feeling better in like maybe the first 2, 3, 4 sessions, and then kind of maybe get hopeless or give up, or stop coming and then come back. And all of that's fine. People need to do whatever works for them. But I just don't want expectations to be unreasonable, right? Because if you come in thinking that you're going to have a couple sessions with the therapist, me or somebody, anyone else, and suddenly everything's going to be better, that's just unfortunately not how it goes. You may learn skills to manage, especially if you're still in the relationship. And I highly recommend, even if you only come for a couple sessions, getting the skills that you may need to have to communicate with them in the living together situation, or co-parenting is a big one. So if you're co-parenting, learning skills. There's so many tactics that you can use to try to just not get roped in, which they're going to continue to do to you until your kids are well into adulthood, I'm sure. But I think you can learn skills to help rather quickly if that's your goal. So please, even if that's what you want to do seek therapy to just get some tools under your belt so that you can manage all of this. And just know, like for me, I have some clients that I've been working with for years, and I have some that pop in once a month or even longer between, just for little maybe resets or something, or just a little support when they need it. And that's all fine. I don't know if all therapists are going to be like that, but I will always meet my client where they're at. So as I mentioned, closure is really, I don't think, a thing. I mean, I think we can try to get to a place where we radically accept what has happened. And that means not doing the bargaining of, staying in the rumination loops of, well, if I would have done this, this wouldn't have happened. If I wouldn't have done this, they wouldn't have said that. We can't do that because all of this is water under the bridge. But also, again, you're trying to make sense of something through a loving, probably compassionate, empathic brain about someone's behavior that doesn't have that kind of wiring in their brain. I believe, given all the years that I've been doing this, I do believe a deeper goal eventually happens where people want to feel clear and steady, no matter what the narcissist does, right? You are back on track. You're back in control of your own life, and you're no longer ruminating to the degree that you were when you first kind of realize what this was. I want to talk about why therapy can feel worse at first too, but therapy after narcissistic abuse can feel really messy in the beginning. Sometimes you feel worse before you feel better. I would say most times you do feel worse before you feel better because your body is finally coming out of survival mode. And when that happens, your brain starts to go, okay, there's safety now to start processing this, right? And you might find yourself having more dreams about the narcissist, and which can be very disturbing because then it feels like you've been with them. So when you're still dealing with chaos, you're often running on adrenaline and denial just to function. But when you leave or you stop engaging, your nervous system can crash. And this is just how biology works. This is just what happens. We can only stay in that heightened state for so long, and then we go all the way down to just a full on crash. And the crash, I think you have to give into it. You need to rest because you've been running basically an emotional marathon on a roller coaster track. It's exhausting. So please let yourself rest. And please be prepared for going through some phases of grief and anger and more exhaustion and more urges to check like their social media or replaying these things. And this is normal too. So you've probably seen grief graphs, right? To grieve, you go through all of these ups and downs and loops and back and forth. I mean, that's what happens, but it only happens for a while. I promise you it's worth it to get away if you can and to do this work to rediscover yourself. And please remember, you're really detoxifying from a cycle that trained your brain to chase this person, to chase for the crumbs that they give you, when really what you've deserved is the whole pie, right? All of the love that should be available in a relationship. So here's the clearest way I can explain, kind of after over explaining in the beginning, but how I can explain what it looks like to start therapy around narcissistic abuse. So the first phase is definitely stabilization. So we really want to Reduce the exposure. And that doesn't mean you have to be no contact. That means reducing the exposure to the abuse. So do you walk away? There's all kinds of ways that you can put up boundaries that it doesn't matter if they respect your boundaries or not, but it's a boundary where you can put up a consequence. And we can talk about that in therapy. We talk about it a lot in our support group too. Reducing exposure, build grounding, just recentering yourself, because we do get so off center with all of the lies and the manipulation and the gaslighting. Sleep support, learning how to regulate your nervous system a little better leads to better sleep. So these are kind of the first phase, I would say, of therapy. And phase two is probably kind of really naming what happened honestly. And I think language is incredibly important. So we're not saying they behaved poorly. We're saying they abused me, right? We're not saying they were aggressive. We're saying they were abusive. We're just using the words that actually match what they did. Because a lot of us, I think, are afraid to use the language that's actually descriptive of what you've experienced. We want to untangle the self blame. The self blame is huge with the clients that I work with. And it keeps coming back even as we go through the healing process. So this is something that we'll revisit often, because at first there's self-blame for one reason. And then as we get farther in the healing process, a lot of the self-blame is around, why didn't I leave earlier? Why didn't I go no contact? Why didn't I have better boundaries? Things like that. So in order to get to those places of understanding why you didn't do that, we need to rebuild your identity and the trust in yourself, because that has been chipped away from you. I've not yet seen a client that hasn't had their self-esteem almost destroyed by this, just being so out of tune kind of what your intuition is telling you. This is a very common thing. So we need to rebuild those things. And then I think kind of the third phase is rebuilding your life, practicing boundaries, not only with narcissistic people in your life, but everywhere, learning to be okay with putting yourself first. And the oxygen mask metaphor is the truest thing out there. You cannot pour from an empty cup, as they say, right? So putting your oxygen mask on so that you can be prepared and ready to fulfill all the roles that you have in your life. That is really important, and it's not selfish. I think a lot of people think that that is selfish, but I think learning to understand that that's not selfish, it's essential, is a big thing. Learning what healthy love feels like. And this is as we get farther into the therapy process, creating a future that doesn't orbit around the narcissist. They are hopefully at some point going to be kind of an afterthought. Or if you share kids and co-parenting with them, you are solely focused on the kids and not putting up with any of the other nonsense. And we can get there. Again, the grief process isn't linear, neither is the healing. It's going in the right direction for both things. I think going in the right direction, but there's going to be some back and forth a little bit along the way, because other things pop up. And oftentimes, this happens very, very often. Clients will come for therapy because they've been partnered with a narcissist. And as they start to do the work, they realize that it's been another narcissistic person in their childhood. Oftentimes it's one or the other parent or both, or just somebody who was pretty involved in their childhood. So that's, of course, again, healing is going to be going in the right direction, but we may have to kind of go back and address those things too. And there's nothing wrong with that. We want to kind of be attending to all the wounds. So as far as, finding a therapist, what I think are a few important things to be looking for are that they validate the impact that you've experienced without making you feel helpless. They understand gaslighting, trauma bonding, DARVO, coercive control, hoovering, all of the things that we experience with narcissistic abuse. They understand what flying monkeys are. They understand what being a supply is. They understand why narcissists cheat, why they're unfaithful. You want to get somebody that really, really understands all of this. And absolutely not someone who pressures you to forgive. We do not want somebody that does that. And I think therapists that don't understand narcissistic abuse kind of see through maybe a couple's counseling lens, where forgiveness is going to set you free. If and when you do that, it needs to be on your terms and your timeline. A good therapist should be helping you focus on safety and boundaries and not just communication skills. And most importantly, this is the most important thing. They believe you. They believe you. They don't say, "Oh, are you sure you weren't just blah, blah, blah?" Right? No, They believe you. And that is absolutely a deal breaker if they don't. That is a non negotiable. And some red flags. I mean, somebody saying everyone's a little narcissistic. That's true. There is healthy narcissism, but you're not there because somebody was a little narcissistic. So please question that. That is a red flag. Minimizing you or seeing their side. No, asking you to see the other person's side. That is okay when we're talking about a typical relationship. When you're partnered with a narcissistic person, these are not the questions your therapist should be asking you or suggesting to you. Pushing couples therapy? Absolutely not. Do not go to couples therapy with the narcissistic person in your life by any means. It won't do any good, first of all. The narcissist is going to try to manipulate the therapist. They're going to try to make you look like you're crazy, or they're going to stop if the therapist doesn't buy into their lies and their games. So it will be a waste of your time. And any good therapist knows not to do couples therapy when there's abuse in the relationship. So that's a deal breaker as well. And certainly, like I said, not every therapist is trained in this, and this is absolutely no criticism on a therapist that might do these things when you first meet them. It's just that they don't understand. It is a specific type of abuse that is so nuanced that I think it's just really hard to find somebody that really does get it. And you certainly don't need to stay in the therapy if it doesn't feel like it's working for you. People come and go out of therapy. It's okay. It's okay to say, I don't think we're the best match, or whatever the language is that works for you, but you can leave that therapeutic relationship and go find something that fits better for you. And then maybe a few tips to help, as you get started with therapy on this, on narcissistic abuse, tracking your triggers. So notice what's happened to you throughout the week that brought you right back into kind of panic mode or survival mode or whatever it is. And what did you do about it? Do you have the skills yet to manage those things? And if not, tell the therapist that, I need skills to work with my triggers. When I get triggered by something, I need to be able to calm myself down. Practice one skill between sessions, just practice one. Small repetitions, and it's like building a muscle. If you're in court or co-parenting, therapy should include a strategy for that too. How you can stay calm in interactions or in court, and document everything, even if it feels small, document it. Just keep a journal. You don't have to write a novel about it, but just this date or even this month, if you have to go back and document things, this helps in court. So document everything. Talk through parenting apps if you have that opportunity. So if you're listening and thinking about starting therapy or trying again after a bad experience, I want you to hear this clearly. You're not crazy. You're absolutely not too sensitive. You're not weak for still missing someone who hurt you. We all experience that. Your nervous system adapted to survive, and now you're learning to live. So if you want structured support, I offer the blueprint. I call it the Blueprint for Recovery class. And then we are also going to be starting classes in January for folks who are separating or divorcing from a narcissist, and for adult children of narcissistic parents. And those will all be starting probably the third week of January. I will certainly let everyone know when they will actually start. Each is a 6-week class, and they will run concurrently and consecutively. I think I'm going to just be doing these classes kind of back to back and at different times in the day, so I can cover time zones so folks aren't having to stay up too late if they want to do the class and they're not in the same time zone that I'm in, which is Pacific, and that's a lot earlier than the East Coast people or people in other parts of the world. So we will be doing quite a few classes. We have the support group every week on Tuesdays at 5 p.m., except for during the winter holidays, and everyone is welcome to join that. The classes I'm a licensed therapist, so we can use your insurance as long as you are in a state that I'm licensed in and I'm in network with your insurance. Otherwise, I try to keep the costs really affordable. I want people to be able to attend these classes and get all of the support that you can. And honestly, my opinion is that the best thing about these classes is the other people that are in there with you. You're going to learn some stuff. I have worksheets and all kinds of exercises for us to do, but the best part of it is the community you build in the class. It is priceless. So that was a lot more than I actually thought I was going to say, but here we are. I hope Sarah feels better soon, and we'll be talking together and doing our typical podcast, hopefully in the very near future. I miss her, and I hope this was helpful. Thank you for listening. Please reach out and let me know what you think, or if you have questions, or just anything. And again, thank you for listening.